Yeah, to my relatives. Hello, this is Mark Charles. It is Tuesday, March 14th. Sitting down with my second cup of coffee, and there's a few things I would like to discuss today going on in our world. But before I begin, let me do as I always do, which is I want to acknowledge I'm speaking to you from what's now called Washington, D.C. These are the traditional lands of the Piscataway, and I want to honor the Piscataway as the hosts of the lands where I'm living. I want to thank the Piscataway for their stewardship of these lands, and I want to just state how humbled I am to be living in these lands today. I was I knew I wanted to do a second cup of coffee today, but I wasn't quite sure what I was going to do. I actually went out and went to one of my favorite coffee shops this morning. I went down to a place called Bourbon Coffee. It's down on the west end of DC, and it's a Rwandan coffee house, and they sell Rwandan coffee beans there. It's one of my favorite places to get coffee here in DC. So I went down there this morning and found some parking, got my coffee. I posted some pictures on Facebook and Twitter. But yeah, I was excited to do this, but I wasn't quite sure what I wanted to talk about or how I wanted to frame it. And as I had some ideas, but I nothing that was really standing out. But as I was driving, I was reminded that today is what's called Equal Pay Day. And for those of you who aren't sure what Equal Pay Day is, I'm going to share a link with you in the chat. This is from an article in NPR. Equal Pay Day. Essentially, women earn anywhere literally between 50 and 80 cents to the male dollar, to the white male dollar. And it averages out to about 77 cents to the male dollar once you average everything in. And so today, March 14th, 2.5 months into 2023, this is the day how much longer into the new year that a woman has to work to make the same amount of pay that a white male earned in the last year. So if a white male earned an amount in 2022, a woman would have to work until this day in 2023 to make the same amount that a white male earned for the same job in 2022. And so this is equal pay day is a weird way to phrase it because it sounds like it's something to celebrate when actually it's something that we need to not just lament, but we need to work better to improve. And so I was doing some research today into Equal Pay Day, and um, well, before I go there, right, I've been doing a lot of dialogue, a lot of teaching these past few days. I did Urban Plunge last night with InterVarsity here in DC. I've done a few other events in the past couple days, the past week and a half, and I start all of my events right after I explain what the doctrine of discovery is. I go in and I talk about the foundations, our Declaration of Independence and our Constitution. Our Declaration of Independence that calls Native Americans merciless Indian savages and never mentions women, right? It says we hold these truths to be self-evident that all men are created equal. President Biden loves to misquote the document and says all men and women are created equal, but that's not what it says. And just misquoting it doesn't fix that. And Equal Pay Day demonstrates that, right? That women are not treated as equal in our society today. They have to work through March 14th to make the same amount of money annually that that a male would make in a single year. And so it's very clear, right? And if we go back to the 19th Amendment that was proposed back in the 1920s, and it was finally ratified by the final state in 2020. And yet, because the expiration had passed, the ERA did not become law. Clearly, this was demonstrated, or not 1920, just a few years ago, Virginia ratified it. I forget what the exact year was. But clearly, right, women are not treated as equal. They're not paid equal. They are not given agency over their own bodies. We are very clear that women are not afforded the same rights that men get in this country. And Equal Pay Day is a very clear demonstration of that. And so the article I shared from NPR gives at least a little bit of the understanding. But when you listen to the pundits and people talking about Equal Pay Day, you'll hear anywhere from usually down as low as maybe 60 to 65 cents per dollar, all the way up to 80 or even 82 or 84 cents per dollar. And it's hard to know how do you break that out and what is exactly looking at. When they first started doing the stat in 1996, they looked at women working full-time jobs, and they compared that to men working full-time jobs and found that there was a gap of 77 cents between the two. Since then, we've done a lot more research, and they've actually added in part-time jobs, because a lot of women who are in the workforce work part-time jobs because of issues like childcare and the expectations that we place on women over men in that arena. And so when they started accounting for that, it changed the demographics or the data a little bit, or actually a lot. And I want to share this article with you. This is from an website called the 19th News, in reference to the 19th Amendment, which was what the ERA would have been had it been ratified back in the 1920s. But this is about Happy Equal Pay Day. Here are 6 charts showing why it's not much of a celebration. And there's two charts I want to highlight for you in this article. And the first one I'm going to share actually on my screen. Let me share this on my screen really quick, so that you can see it. Hold on just a second. Okay. So this chart here is the gender pay gap, and it shows from tracking back to the 1960s all the way up until 2021 how wide that pay gap is, and the way it's narrowed a little bit, but it gives a fairly good idea of that gender pay gap. Oh, it didn't show it on there. Sorry. Let me show you this now. So here's the gender pay gap right here on this website. And you can see the pay gap between men and women going back to the 1960s all the way up to 2021. And that's a significant pay gap, right? You know, this is definitely an issue that we need to correct in our country. But there's another graph I want to show. It's in that same article, and I actually uploaded the graphic here. And this graph shows the pay gap broken out by race and ethnicity. So if the white male earns $1, Asian American, Native Hawaiian, and Pacific Islanders earn 80 cents to the dollar, women. White, non-Latino women earn 73 cents to the dollar. Black women earn 64 cents to the dollar. Latinx, Latino women earn 54 cents to the dollar. And Native women earn 51 cents to the white male dollar. Even when I listened to news reports today, the Native stat wasn't even. They talked about the other stats. Well, that's not true. They talk about the white, the black, and the Latina. They didn't talk about the first stat, which was Asian American and Native Hawaiian, and they didn't talk about Native women. And right, these are things we have to discuss. The fact that Native women earn 51 cents to the male dollar is despicable. And this is something we need to do a better job of addressing in our country. And so I wanted just to state that, yeah, today is what they call Equal Pay Day. It is not something to be celebrated. It is something not only to be lamented, but something that we need to correct. And to correct it, we have to deal with our foundations. We have to deal with what's written in our Declaration of Independence, what's written in our Constitution, and actually what's excluded from our Declaration of Independence and what's excluded from our Constitution, which is women, right? The Declaration of Independence says all men are created equal. The Constitution has 51 gender-specific male pronouns, not a single female pronoun in the entire document. We have to fix this at a foundational level. if we are going to address this problem. The next thing I wanted to talk about, and let me see who's on here. I see, hey, Nina, thank you for joining. Phil Fox, thank you for joining. Nina wrote, I'm a cook, and most of the time I earn less than my male coworkers, even ones who have less experience than me, and often when they work in a place, haven't worked in a place as long as I have. And right, thank you, Nina, for sharing this. This is unjust, and this is something that we need to address, and we need to address it at a foundational level. Thank you for joining today, Nina. Thank you, Mr. Phil Fox, for being here today. The next thing I want to talk about today is there has been news, you've probably been hearing about it, about these bank failures in Silicon Valley. And I'm going to share this article with you. This is an AP article titled U.S. Government Moves to Stop the Potential Banking Crisis. I've been watching this. It's been in the news since the middle of last week when Silicon Valley Bank, a bank to many of the startups, it's been around for 40 years. It had hundreds of billions of dollars in deposits, but it invested them unwisely in long-term bonds and other securities. And when there was money being taken out of the bank by startups because of rising interest rates and inflation and turning in the economy, they were not able to get the cash to pay out these deposits. So they had to sell some of their bonds at a loss. They sold, I think, $40 billion worth of bonds and lost like $22 billion because they had to sell them. They had bought them at such a low interest rate, and they had bought them as 30-year bonds instead of 1 or 2 or 5-year bonds. And so they had to sell them, and they sold them at a loss, and they lost $2 billion. And when they announced that, there was a run on the bank. This was last Thursday. On Friday, they closed the bank, and the government basically took it over. Now, when a bank fails like that, there is the FDIC insurance, which pays depositors up to $250,000 for their deposits. So it reimburses them and ensures that much of their money is safe, and that the government has the funding and the processes in place to make sure that money is not lost. And this is to protect your average investor. Not your average investor, your average person who's using a bank, which is just most Americans, are almost all Americans. But the challenge is right, this is in Silicon Valley, which is not diverse at all, and has a lot of very wealthy, well-financed, not only companies, but individuals living in that place. And I found this article in Time that I want to share that says more than 85% of Silicon Valley Bank's deposits were not insured. And here's what this means for customers. And one of the paragraphs in this article said more than 85% of the bank's deposits were uninsured, according to estimates in a recent regulatory filing. That's because FDIC deposit insurance is meant for everyday bank users and maxes out at $250,000. Many Silicon Valley startups had millions or even hundreds of millions of dollars deposited in the bank, money they used to run their companies and to pay employees. So again, the challenge with this bank located in Silicon Valley is its customers were not average people. They were startups and companies that were using this bank, and they had not just $250,000 in there. They had millions, even tens of millions of dollars deposited in this bank. And so this, of course, then brings up the question of diversity in Silicon Valley. And so we have this article I'm sharing from a website called tech.co. And it is 10 stats that prove Silicon Valley hasn't fixed its diversity problem. And I want to actually share a graphic from this article here. And in this graphic, these are 10 stats demonstrating the diversity challenges in our problems in Silicon Valley. 10 of the largest technology companies in Silicon Valley had no Black women employees in 2016. 3 of the large technology companies in Silicon Valley had no Black employees at all. 6 large technological companies in Silicon Valley had no female executives. Nearly 1/3 of large tech companies in Silicon Valley had no executives who were women of color. White men accounted for 39% of professionals and 47% of managers and 59% of executives. So again, the demographic Silicon Valley Bank was serving was white male companies and white male executives. And 85% of their deposits were above the insured rate of $250,000. And so when the bank failed and the FDIC took it over on Friday, right, it created even more havoc because now you had these companies and these people who had way more than $250,000 in the bank, and suddenly they're afraid what's going to happen to their money. And the government, of course, is afraid about what's going to happen with the banks. And whenever banks start failing, and this is, I think, the largest bank failure our nation has seen, I think, ever. This was a very large bank failure. And they were afraid of it happening to other banks. And so there was a lot of meetings that took place over the weekend. And on Monday morning, they announced that the government was going to cover every depositor's money in that bank, no matter what it was. So they were gonna not only refund the $250,000 that people had in there, but for companies and people who had more than that above the insured amount, they were going to cover those amounts too. And this is a sticky issue because obviously bank failures, especially on this level, are very dramatic and have a lot of implications for the broader economy. And no one wanted to see the meltdown like what happened in 2008 when the housing market bubble burst, which I've been actually reading about more recently as I've been reading the Obama book, Promised Land, and he has several sections in there talking at length about the housing crisis and what he was dealing with when he first came into office in 2008. Right, so there was fears of that something like that happening again. And so the U.S. government took, again, another extraordinary step of they didn't bail out the bank or the investors or shareholders of the bank, but they bailed out the depositors of the bank, even those who were above the uninsured amount. And again, the majority of the companies and the startups, like all of Silicon Valley, are white men. And so, right, in this time where we don't have the money to pay back student loans, we don't have resources to do these other things, we obviously have the money to make sure that white landowning men from the 1% don't lose their money. And it's hard to completely bemoan this. I know something had to be done, but it just seems like these very drastic things. It's like we can't allow white male businesses and people to experience what the rest of us experience in the country, which is this very insecure, with not many safety nets beneath us life. And if the white landowning male is getting insecure, then we have to make sure that doesn't happen, because that could cause a ripple effect that would then affect the rest of us too. And again, this is just a problem of the deeper systemic issues that we have, which is, we have problems where these sort of things happen much more frequently in places where there's a lot of white money as compared to places where there is a lot of money of people of color. And we just don't treat these two things as equally. So I wanted to point this out because this is just another challenge we face with this systemic and historic racism and white supremacy that has existed within our country. The last thing I wanted to talk about. And I'm going to share one more article. This is kind of a follow-up. This is the Silicon Valley indicators. And this just shows, this article has a good graph that shows the number of employees in Silicon Valley, managers, executives, tech workers, and all employees. And it's another good thing to kind of see as you look through that. The last thing I want to talk about, and today we're talking about equal pay day, failing banks, and drilling for oil in Alaska. And if you've been paying attention over the weekend, I think it was, President Biden's approved the Willow Project. The Willow Project is a very large drilling project in Alaska, and it opens up large pieces of land for drilling by Conoco. And there have been a lot of protests, both leading up to this as well as to once it's happened, where environmentalists and people are absolutely opposed to this opening up this huge section of Alaska for drilling. Again, this is called the Willow Project. I'm going to share an article about this. Again, this is in ABC News, and I want to talk about this again. And the thing that I've been paying attention to this as it's been happening over the weekend, but as I was driving to get my coffee this morning, I actually heard some more in-depth stories about it. And I think I might have been listening to one on the Wall Street Journal as I was driving. And they interviewed Deb Haaland, who obviously is the Laguna woman who serves as Secretary of the Interior. And they interviewed her regarding this Willow Project and the fact that Biden had approved this Willow Project. And her quote that she gave in the Willow Project was that the Biden administration is still deeply committed to environmental issues, and the road to addressing these issues is not always straight, but she was confident that we were on the right track, and while the road was windy and wouldn't take us there directly, we will get there soon. And I heard this, and I thought two things immediately, which is, first of all, Congresswoman Deb Haaland never would have said that. She never would have said that. Second, I thought, why is Deb Haaland defending this choice instead of Joe Biden defending this choice? And it reminded me of what happened when Deb Haaland was confirmed. So if you follow Deb Haaland's career, not just her term as the Secretary of the Interior, but if you follow her career, when she ran for Congress from New Mexico, she ran, and some of her key things that she ran on was she was against drilling, she was against fracking, and she was radically in support of Standing Rock, which was protesting the building of the Dakota Access Pipeline. And she even spent some time at Standing Rock in support of that protest. And these were some of the things that she ran on adamantly when she was running for Congress in New Mexico. And when she got nominated for the Department of the Interior, the Secretary of the Interior, she was facing, obviously, questioning by both Democrat and Republican senators. And I watched those hearings. And there was one senator, Senator Steve Daines, I forget where he's from, but Senator Steve Daines was questioning her. And in his questioning of her, he confronted her directly on her opposition to drilling and on her opposition to fracking. And her response to those questions was that she was serving at the pleasure of the president, and it was his policies and his agenda that she was going to support. Now, that's striking because President Biden, when he was running, Joe Biden, when he was running, was not opposed to drilling, was not opposed to fracking, and did not directly support Standing Rock. And so basically, this Republican senator, Steve Daines, wanted to make sure that she was going to stand with the status quo white male from the 1% that had nominated her, and that she wasn't going to challenge him in his thinking. And that really bothered me. And I remember watching that confirmation hearing. And what struck me was, this was on the first day of the hearing, and I came back and I listened the second day. And I like Deb Haaland. I like the things she stands for. I like the voice she brings to the table. She was actually, when I was running for president, she was on my short list to be my Secretary of State. And I was watching her very carefully. And I thought to myself that night as I was watching these confirmation hearings that if I was Joe Biden and I saw one of my secretaries, especially someone like Deb Haaland, getting kind of boxed in by a senator and forced to advocate for policies she didn't believe in, I would have called her and said, Deb, you're on my cabinet because I want to hear your voice and hear your perspective. Please respond to what he's saying with what you believe and what you're going to tell me and what you're going to work to do. I'm not here for a bunch of yes people to just confirm what I'm saying. I want debate and I want discussion. But clearly Joe Biden didn't say that to her. And so she had to basically say, yeah, I'm going to lay down what I believe in, and I'm going to support what this white landowning status quo male from the 1% believes in. And that was very disappointing. And the challenge is right, we've seen the fruit of that now. We saw the fruit of that in October of 2021 when there was a large protest at the Department of the Interior, and people were protesting both Deb Haaland and Joe Biden. And I actually did a second cup of coffee on this, and this was also about drilling and the opening up of land for drilling. I'm going to share that second cup of coffee from October of 2021, and I bookmarked it to the place where I talked directly about that and about the confirmation hearing again. And then now, again, what struck me most about this, and this is a complaint I have about Joe Biden, because he loves to take credit for, I've nominated the first Native American woman Secretary of the Interior. I nominate on my cabinet. I have the first African American woman as my VP. I have all these other minorities and people from the margins who I put in first. And look at me, look what I've done. Look at all these great things I've done. But then he muffles them. And not only does he muffle them, he makes them go out and defend what he's done, right? This wasn't Deb's decision. This was Joe's decision. And if you read that ABC article that I shared just a few moments ago, there were two paragraphs, two sections of that article that I want to just highlight for you. One said Haaland was notably silent on the project, which she had opposed as a New Mexico congresswoman before becoming Interior Secretary 2 years ago, until she released a video on Monday evening. In that video, it says Haaland defended the Biden administration's record on climate change, saying, I am confident that we are on the right path, even if it's not always a straight line. And then it said Biden has not commented publicly on the project's approval. Joe Biden, President Biden, if you want to take credit for being the first white landowning status quo male from the 1% to nominate people of color and marginalized people to your cabinet and to positions of authority in your administration, then when you do something against their beliefs and against their understandings and even against the advice they're hopefully giving to you, You need to go front and center and defend your actions and not send these people from the margins out to soften the audience up. You need to take credit for what you have done. And that's what infuriates me about Joe Biden. This infuriates me, right? And this isn't the first time he's done this. But this is what his implicit racial bias looks like. Right? He nominates people of color and women and marginalized people to these positions, knowing that they believe and advocate for things different than what he believes and advocates for. And then when he makes decisions contrary to their beliefs and understandings, he sends them out to defend him instead of him going front and center and taking credit for what he did. That's cowardice. Trump did it. Biden does it. This is how the country works. And it infuriates me. I hate to see that treatment. If you want to nominate someone as fierce as Deb Haaland and have her on your cabinet, Mr. President, you better be bold enough to take credit when you go against what I hope was her counsel to you. And if that wasn't her counsel to you, then we have a whole nother discussion about that. Anyway, these are the things I've been pondering, my relatives. These are the frustrations that we have. These are the things we have to work through. And all of these things are foundational issues, right? We're not going to fix them by misquoting our foundations. We're not going to fix them by passing a single law or changing a single policy. We have to address these things at a foundational level, right? There is nothing in our Constitution anywhere that states we have a value for the world we live in. Nothing in there that states we have a value for the environment. This is why, right? So the whole assumption of our Constitution is based on exploitation and profit and protecting the interests of white landowning men. We have to change that. We have to address that at a foundational level. We have a lot of work to do. And one of the things, if you've noticed my social media these past few days, I've done several lectures and I've preached a few times, and I've done several lectures in February and this early part of March. And one of the things I've started posting is building common memory, one lecture, one sermon, one group, one group of people at a time. And yeah, that's what I'm trying to do. I'm continuing to try and address these issues and to move us forward in this space. And even if it has to happen at the moment in these smaller steps, but I'm continuing to press forward because we have to change the conversation. We have to address these things. And we have to figure out how do we get the nation to wrestle with these things both at a national level as well as at a foundational and systemic level. So a bit of frustration today, but overall, I've actually been really excited about the lectures I've been able to give and the work that is going on right now and the conversations I'm having. If you saw my social media post, you saw last night, I was at speaking to students through InterVarsity's Urban Plunge. And in all of my presentations in the past few weeks, I have been actually very intentionally doing about 35 to 45 minutes of deconstruction of the mythological legacy of Abraham Lincoln. And what I'm trying to do is I'm demonstrating to people clearly how Abraham Lincoln was a blatant, unapologetic, self-proclaimed white supremacist and one of the most genocidal presidents in our nation's history. And I'm doing this not just to deconstruct Lincoln, but to ask the question, why do we consider him our greatest president? What does it say about our values as a nation when we hold someone like that up as our greatest president? And so it's not just about confronting Lincoln and what he did, it's confronting why we love him as a nation and why we hold him in such high esteem. And I'm really working hard to challenge the audience when I speak to confront what we believe about ourselves and about our own nation, that we would continue to celebrate people like Abraham Lincoln. And I can tell you that I've been loving the Q&As recently, because it's really kind of gripping people both emotionally and I would say even spiritually. And it's led to some very robust and very engaging Q&As. And this is like, these are the kind of things I live for. I love this type of dialogue. I love challenging this thinking, challenging this paradigm, and then having discussion about it. So I've been very excited to see that happen in these past few days. If you're kind of new here and you're still getting familiar with some of my work, I want to share with you my website where you can buy signed copies of the book I co-authored, Unsettling Truths. You can buy not only a single copy of the book, but you can also buy a pack of 10 of the books for a book study. And if you buy the 10 pack, the book study special, I will give you and your study a 45-minute virtual Q&A for free. Anytime in the next year, you can schedule it with my office, and we can do a virtual Q&A to answer questions from your study about the book. It's one of the things I love doing right now. Is I have one of these maybe every 7 to 10 days, and I love these Q&As. They're so engaging, and I'm really grateful for the opportunity to do that. I also want to share that I'm on Patreon. And one of the things I do on my Patreon site, I have several tiers. The most popular tier of my Patreon site is the Ask Questions tier. And on my second cup of coffee, each month I have different guests. In fact, I have 2 guests coming up this month yet. On Thursday, March 16th, Shane Claiborne is going to be here talking about his new book. Shane's a good friend of mine. I've worked with him for a long time, and I really appreciate the stuff he does. He is very active in issues around abolishing the death sentence, and has really worked hard to have integrity in the work that he does and the walk that he walks. And so I'm thrilled to have him on for a second cup of coffee on Thursday, March 16th of this week. And then next week, I'm going to have Sarah Augustine. And Sarah wrote the book, The Land Is Not Empty, this book that I had the opportunity to write the foreword for. And I really like the work that Sarah's doing. I love her voice. And I had her on my second cup of coffee about a year ago, and I'm going to have her on again next week. And the thing that we do for Patreon, after we conclude the second cup of coffee, where we have a discussion and an interview on my second cup of coffee, then we jump over to my Patreon. And for people who are subscribed to my Patreon at the Ask Questions level or above, they get to join us for a virtual Q&A. And so we bring everyone onto a Zoom call, and then we have a Q&A with the members of my Patreon, and then myself and the guest. And it just gives an opportunity to have a bit of a deeper dialogue and some more engagement, and to bring the conversation a little bit deeper, which is the whole point of my Patreon. A lot of people who do the work I do, they try to make money, feed their families off of this type of work. One way a lot of people do it is they sell advertising on their videos. I've chosen not to monetize my social media, my YouTube channel. They still show ads on there, but I'm not making money off those ads. But I did decide to do the Patreon model, where I give people more in-depth engagement, and we have Q&As and extra content. And I found it's a great way to kind of engage things at a deeper level. And through the subscription that Patreon uses, it allows me to bring in some income as well. So if you're interested in joining me on Patreon, this Thursday after my second cup of coffee, I'll be having a dialogue with Shane Claiborne. And then next week, I will be having a Q&A on my Patreon after my second cup of coffee with Sarah Augustine. And I would be thrilled if you would join me for that. But anyway, I'm grateful for all of you. Thank you for joining me for this dialogue today. Let me look back to see if I've missed anyone here. I see there's quite a few people online. Frackle, Yacht A, thank you for joining. It's good to have you here. Anita, thank you for joining. Terrell, thank you for joining today. Nina, thank you for joining today. Obsolete Elite, thank you for joining today. I appreciate everyone who's been a part of this. Thank you for sitting down with me for a second cup of coffee. And I look forward to the conversation I'm going to have with Shane on Thursday. And I hope you all have a great rest of the day. Walk in beauty, my relatives. And may we all learn how to walk in beauty together. Hook on that.